Now, earlier today, the country's largest energy provider, Electric Ireland, announced a reduction in electricity and gas prices. This follows similar moves by Pinergy and Energia, yet bills still remain far in excess of what they were in 2020 before the energy crisis. Taoiseach Leo Varadkar does not believe the cuts will be enough. He has promised to meet with the providers. Well, here to discuss if we can expect further reductions is Fianna Fáil Senator Timmy Dooley, People Before Profits Paul Murphy, News Talk broadcaster Andrea Gilligan, and from bonkers.ie, Daragh Cassidy. You're all very welcome along to the programme tonight. To come to you first on this, Daragh, Ireland's 1.1 million Electric Ireland customers got some good news today, but they may still be thinking, my bills are far in excess of what they were, 3 years ago. I'm still likely to be paying an awful lot, and it's not coming in until November. Put these price drops in the context of where gas and electricity prices are right now in this country.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's been a while since we've been talking about price decreases. So in some ways, it's obviously welcome news, but we do need to put things into perspective. Electric Ireland's electricity prices are going down by 10%. Its gas prices are going down by 12%. So that'll save people around €200 a year on their gas and electricity costs. But it does need to be put into perspective. Even after the price drop, its prices are still around double normal levels. And to put that into monetary terms, the average Electric Ireland customer is going to be paying this winter around €1,000 more for their electricity and around €1,000 more, believe it or not, for their gas. So yes, prices are falling, and obviously that is welcome news, and it's good that it's happening as we move into the colder autumn and winter months, but it's still going to be a really, really expensive winter to heat and light our homes. The energy crisis isn't over. I think maybe the peak has passed, but we're a long, long way from energy prices returning to normal.
Yeah, there's been a big concerted push to see these price drops, and they have been a long time coming. Why is it that they've been stalled in Ireland when we've seen right across Europe people benefiting, I suppose, from prices coming down on the wholesale market?
The main reason, part of it's to do with hedging, and when suppliers have bought their energy, there's a feeling that maybe they hedged incorrectly or they didn't hedge particularly well. But the fact of the matter is that in Ireland, the cost of electricity on the wholesale markets is still really, really high. It's still around 2.5 times normal levels. So unfortunately, there hasn't actually been a huge amount to pass on. And when you look at the price of gas, we import most of our gas via the UK. Prices there are still around double what they would usually be. So of course, then you could say, well, why are they still so high? And there definitely are questions to be asked as to why the cost of generating electricity, in particular in Ireland, is so expensive.
Yeah, we can talk a bit about that. But to come to you, Timmy, on this, the Taoiseach today welcomed the price drop, but he says he doesn't believe the cuts are enough. Would you agree with his thoughts there?
Yeah, I would, and that's kind of what most people in the country think. And I think you've rightly identified when they look at the average price across Europe, and we seem to be a very significant outlier. It creates the question, why is it so expensive to generate electricity here? I mean, I know we're on the end of the gas line, fair enough. We have generated our own gas here in the past, and whilst gas has been very volatile over the past 2 years since the war in Ukraine, it had been creeping up even since 2019 levels.
Yeah, we have seen sort of those increases. I mean, this didn't start with,
but I think Darragh's
with
point,
the war in Ukraine,
I accept that
it
because
led to an energy crisis. But we've always had those very high prices here.
We've seen volatility in the gas market, but I think the difficulty now is that it remained at such a high level above the average across Europe, that people are rightly asking, well, what is it that's wrong with the way our wholesale market works, the way we generate electricity and the way we bill and charge for it. And I think that's where the Taoiseach is going to have a significant role from a government perspective in looking at that with the regulator. Because quite frankly, our economy will not be able to continue to sustain the high levels of the cost of electricity, as you know.
When you say he's going to look at it, I mean, he has talked about meeting with energy providers. What's he going to be saying to them?
I suspect he's going to try to understand better why Ireland is so far out of kilter with the rest of Europe.
Does government not understand why already? We know that it's quite complex about, I suppose, where it's sourced and how it's distributed and the infrastructure and all of that. But surely,
yeah, and the whole hedging, as Daragh has identified, and others.
People have talked about high bills and high prices and why we're paying so much more. I think 80% above the average European prices when it comes to things like electricity. Does the government not know that we're paying that much and why we're paying that much more?
Of course the government know, and the government intervened last year, as you know, with a €600 credit on domestic electricity bills to cushion the impact of the market in place. But it's not just a simple as the Taoiseach rocking up and telling them to reduce the prices. There are obviously infrastructural issues within the way in which electricity market operates here. And we have to try to get to the bottom of that so that we don't see these massive profits from the generating companies. I mean, you look at our mix. Most of our electricity comes from gas, but we're also bringing more and more wind onto the grid. Whilst the next wave of offshore wind will be expensive to bring to the marketplace, many of the current wind farms are not high cost by comparison. So there is an opportunity there to look at the mix of generation.
And look, we do keep hearing about the opportunities. I guess when people though are looking at their bills, Paul, they're wondering, when will there be kind of light at the end of the tunnel here? How do you assess the government's approach to energy companies and that word from the Taoiseach today that he's going to speak with the providers?
Well, it's just like their approach to the grocery companies. It's extremely light touch. It's a vague hint of some pressure, but no intention or threat of actually doing anything about it.
What was said about that meeting with the retail forum was that we will gather the retailers in and tell them to bring their prices down when they were already going to bring their prices down.
Bring a few prices down and the vast majority of prices
Do you think that's what we're likely to see off the back of this meeting?
Yeah, well, there'll be a few more price reductions, presumably, of other companies following, but that will be it. They will stay unaffordably high, exactly with a situation where people are paying an extra €1,000 on electricity, an extra €1,000 on other fuel, and an extra €1,000 on their groceries. And that is simply unaffordable for people. And something that hasn't been part of the conversation so far is profits. Profits are a crucial reason why prices are so high. You can look at ESB, of which Electric Ireland is a part. You can look at SSE. You could look at Centrica, which controls Bord Gáis. All of their profits are very, very significantly up last year on the year before. Some of them have almost a tripling of profits. That's where this money is going. I mean, 2/3 of the price increases that we're seeing in the economy are a consequence of profiteering.
I'm interested because we've heard the defence on that the profits aren't being made in the retail arm. They're being made elsewhere, and they can't they have to separate. They need to remain independent of each other.
So, but that is precisely the root of the problem.
Is that not justifiable?
So that's where this all comes from. And you're right, it goes back well before the invasion of Ukraine. It goes back to the so-called liberalisation of the energy market, of beginning to break up ESB, where ESB is a state-owned company. We own it. The company that's making all this profit, we own it. They are not legally allowed to use the profits they're making from generation to reduce the prices for ordinary people in order to create this artificial market.
And you think that's wrong and that needs to change?
Well, as a consequence of this, we went from having some of the lowest electricity prices in Europe to having some of the highest. So what we need to have is price controls on electricity. We can pass a ministerial regulation to say these cannot charge more than 25 cents per electricity unit, and we should renationalise the sector.
Andrea, I want to bring you in here. Extraordinary profits, to be fair, as Paul is saying, that these companies have generated, but they have defended those profits insofar as, the retail arm of things has suffered losses. But do people feel, do you think in general, that they're being ripped off when it comes to their energy prices in this country when you compare the prices elsewhere? And does something need to be done about that?
I think when you, as a customer, hear the windfall, the tax, the profits from a lot of these suppliers, it's very hard to fathom why you were paying effectively double what more than what you did 18 months ago, and even before actually the war in Ukraine broke out. And like as Daragh pointed out, you're going to get now, if you're an Electric Ireland customer, somewhere in the region of about 210 quid of a drop now in your electricity, and maybe, what is it, 216 for your gas or something to that effect. It's hard to understand. Like, I think if you're a viewer watching this tonight, your sole question is, am I going to see a drop in my next gas and electricity bill? And I think it's optimistic to say, yes, you're going to see anything more than a marginal decrease in that bill. And I think that people are sort of listening to this probably tonight and thinking, right, Electric Ireland, great. They're the third, electricity supplier or supplier within 2 weeks, and undoubtedly the most significant because they're the largest supplier in the game. But I think for people, like, it's not going to be the significant drop that they're expecting. It's still going to take a huge amount of time. And I think, you know, we talk about like what needs to be done. The only thing people are worried about, maybe not tonight because we're looking at a heat wave tomorrow, but I think in the next 2 or 3 weeks, the only thing people are wondering, am I getting an energy credit? Am I going to get 3 of them like I got last year? Am I still going to get the 600 quid? And I know there's some in government that think absolutely we need to continue with that.
Yeah.
Or do we go for the more targeted approach rather than the universality of it all, you know?
I mean, in essence with this, if we keep, you know, rolling out energy credits, you know, every budget and then doing so maybe 6 months later, is the state, you know, subventing the company by paying a portion of the bill and allowing them to, you know, to keep charging what they're charging there, Daragh?
Well, you could make that argument, but I mean, I do think, though, something does need to be done at the budget to help people, regardless.
But does it seem like if you're talking about a semi-state company here, and essentially then you're getting...
I don't think it would have made a difference because of the structure of the market. I know, I understand that argument.
Does it make sense to do that, or do we need to kind of have an overhaul
Prices
and look
won't
at
come
the
down.
pricing?
There'll be no difference to prices whether or not people get a credit. The credit did not stop Electric Ireland from reducing its prices. So if you don't want a credit to be paid out, fine, but that is not going to have any effect on whether prices go up or down. What I will be calling on the government to do, though, is to keep the reduced rate of VAT. It's due to go back up to 13.5%. This is not the time for the government to be taking more money from customers on their energy bills. You know, gas, electricity, it's not a luxury product. I don't see why it needs to be taxed so highly to begin with.
The only thing I would say, Claire, is I would say a lot of people are probably concerned that the drop actually from Electric Ireland and other providers will mean that they won't get the credit, or the government will think there's some kind of pressure off and they don't need to introduce the same level of credits. And the 4 weeks to make that decision. So
I mean, so the big fear is that it actually will be a more difficult winter for people because if, for example, the VAT rate was to go up to 13.5%, and remember, it wasn't really a €600 credit, it was actually an €800 credit because we got €200 in March. So if that was to be reduced to maybe €400 and the VAT rate goes up, as you were saying, Andrea, it actually, despite the price drops, will be an even more expensive winter for everyone.
OK, Timmy, what's likely to happen there? First, there's the VAT rate, which was reduced down to, what, 9% or down. Is that likely? I mean, it's not likely to be tinkered with, is it?
I should hope not. Obviously, the government are in the throes of deciding the budget, but I think, notwithstanding the reduction, which is really welcome, there is going to be very significant pressure on households through this winter, not just on energy, but on the increasing cost generally and the inflationary pressure that's there.
What about the energy credit? And what about the energy credit? Is there a lot of push and pressure on the government to reintroduce more credits when we're seeing the prices maybe not coming down as much as consumers would like?
All members of the government have constituency offices and they're hearing it from constituents, and it's something that I certainly will be advocating for, as I think most others in politics will, to try and retain those credits there to take and alleviate some of the pressure that are on households over the
we did have a warning though from the central bank, didn't we, just about inflation and about what, you know, government interventions and how, you know,
but I think Daragh makes the point, it's not a luxury. Energy is not a luxury. People have to remain warm.
But that there still could be, you know, fallout from that. But notwithstanding that, the sense is, do you think the sense is within government circles that we will need, and there will be those energy credits?
That's certainly something that I'm advocating for, and I think most people within the political process are. Obviously, government have a difficult decision to take in terms of structuring the budget, but I would hope that it's something that will be.
Yeah, just briefly on this, and people would say, you know, you were saying that, you know, Leo Varadkar can't just rock up and tell energy providers to cut prices. Well, people will say, look, it is the semi-state company. There are huge profits being made there.
I think the profits are made on the back end.
The question is, you know, if we're not looking for quick fixes and maybe we need to look and assess, you know, the energy market here, do you think something more in-depth needs to be done? Do you think more action needs to be taken to pull down bills? Because what people would say is this is just not sustainable.
Yeah. I do. I think there needs to be a review of the structure of the market, but I think you also have to be careful that you retain that competitive pressure, because what we don't want to see is some companies fail in the middle. Now, I know Paul has a different view.
But just remember, because we own ultimately the ESB, we get that money back ultimately.
By way of dividends.
The government takes a dividend, the rest gets invested into the grid, and there is a huge amount of money that needs to be invested in the grid to help meet our climate change targets over the coming years. So it's not as if it's going to some bullshit fund.
this competitive market involves different people traipsing down the same streets, offering people electricity with different deals with different providers. The electricity is all coming from the same place, right? It's completely artificial so that some of these companies can create profits. It does not make sense. This should be a public utility run on a not-for-profit basis with two mandates. One, to deliver low-cost electricity for ordinary people, and two, to have a much more rapid transition to a green zero-carbon economy. That's what we should be doing. And that they're some of the key elements of what will be demanded by people when they're on the streets for the Cost of Living Coalition protest on Saturday, the 7th of October, before the budget, 1 o'clock at Parnell Square, to maximise pressure on the government.
You got the plug in there on that one, Paul. But I'm just thinking about what the ESRI said back in June, Andrea, saying there are possible explanations for companies not bringing their prices down. Anti-competitive behaviour when firms fail to bring down a wholesale price decrease. Like, is that something that should be investigated more? As in, we keep hearing from the Taoiseach, we heard about it when there was allegations of price gouging, say, in the retail sector and elsewhere, going, we do take this seriously and we will investigate that. Do you think there's a sense in the public that, you know, we are taking a hit and we're paying an awful lot more for, you know, the basics than you see in other countries? Yeah. We're not doing much about it.
No, and like I think even some of the opposition actually parties previously called for the regulator to have more powers as well within the area. I think the Taoiseach previously said that they were, you know, well equipped in terms of the level of powers. It wasn't something that could not be done. But I mean, you'd have to question whether or not that, you know, it's more regulatory powers or involvement that might actually be a way of even addressing some of this.
Do we need more regulatory oversight, Timmy?
I think it wouldn't be a hindrance. I think it would give confidence to the public that everything that can be done is done within the marketplace, but it may not produce the immediate drop that's required. I think we've got to look at how the companies are hedging, how they're buying forward.
I think transparency is important, though, and that's interesting what you're saying, Daragh. You think, yeah, there does need to be more oversight here. Do you think, I mean, there's a lack of clarity really about where our prices are coming from?
Well, yeah, potentially. But so just asking the question, do we think there should be more regulatory, you know, power? Yes. But I mean, the CRU needs us. I think Comreg and the telecommunications sector needs us. We're very, very pro-business in this country, which is great. It's served us very, very well. But I just think at a government level, there isn't a strong enough voice for the consumer at times. So it's not just in the energy sector, in my opinion. You see this everywhere. You see it in the banking sector, you see it in the telecommunications sector, and of course in the energy sector.
All right. Thank you, Daragh, for joining us.